Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. I thought it would be fun to sit down and chat with you guys because I've been seeing a lot of these videos on YouTube, and I was going to open up my Sephora app and go back and look at my first purchases, and I thought why not film it for you and chat about them on camera because I've been loving these videos so much. I've been binge watching them. If you guys missed the original video, Taylor from the Taylor actually filmed a video where she went through and looked at her very first Sephora orders and just chatted about the products and whether or not she still loves them or she decluttered them, and I just thought it was a lot of fun. Even if you don't film videos, I would love to hear about your first purchases from Sephora or Ulta, and let me know if there's still staples in your collection. I think it's really fun because a lot of people have very emotional ties to makeup, and I'm just kind of curious to see what I was using back in the day when I first got into specifically high-end makeup. So let's jump into it and I'll chat about the products. Okay, so I scrolled to the bottom and my first orders are from 2011, which is so crazy. That is when I actually discovered the beauty community on YouTube, and I started watching videos and buying products based off of my favorite channels' recommendations. So I placed 2 orders in 2011. The very first thing that I got, which is a little bit random, but I placed an order on Sephora.com, and all I got was a mini Philosophy Purity Made Simple cleanser. But I remember liking that cleanser a lot for a while. Everybody was raving about it, so I used it for a long time, and I really hadn't gotten into skincare. I mean, it even took me a few years after that to really get into skincare. So I remember using that every single time I washed my face with my Clarisonic. I don't currently use that. I think I stopped using it a few years ago because it didn't really agree with my skin, and now I use something a little bit different. About 2 months later, I placed my second order, and I remember buying this blush. This is the Tarte Amazonian Clay 12-Hour Blush in the shade Dollface, and I loved that blush so much. I actually just recently decluttered it because mine expired. I had it for a long time before it expired, but it just kind of dried out and it wasn't as pigmented or smooth as it once was, so I had to part with it. But I remember that I had oily skin and no blush seemed to last on my skin at all. I only used drugstore products. And honestly, drugstore products have come a long way since then, but I never found a blush that stayed in place all day long. By the end of the day, it was completely gone. So I remember reading about that one and just hearing how it was going to stay in place for 12 hours and it had Amazonian clay, and I decided to splurge. And that was a big splurge for me. I still rarely splurge on high-end blushes because I have some that work really well and I like a lot of drugstore blushes at this point, but I fell in love with that. I loved it so much. I wore it all the time and I still think it's a beautiful color. I also got a mini Benefit Bad Gal Lash Mascara because again, everybody was raving about that product. I bought a lot of these products based on other people's recommendations, and I didn't love that. The wand was a little bit large, the mascara itself was a little bit dry, and it never really became an essential for me, and I just didn't fall in love with that, so I never ended up purchasing the full size. The last thing that I got in that order is the Justin Bieber Someday by Justin Bieber perfume. I remember going into Sephora and smelling that perfume, and I loved it. I wasn't like a diehard Justin Bieber fan or anything like that, but I was trying to find a good fragrance, and I remember spraying that one and really loving it, so I must have ordered it online. So my next order wasn't until 2012, and in April of 2012, I actually purchased another one of the Tarte Amazonian Clay 12-Hour Blushes in the shade Exposed, and Exposed is one of my favorite blushes of all time. I actually just recently decluttered that one as well because it dried out, but I did not realize that I had them since 2011 and 2012. They lasted about 5 or 6 years. I know some people toss products sooner than that, but I think powder products can be cleaned if you spray them with rubbing alcohol, or at least like sanitized, I guess is a better word for it, but the actual texture of the product just got a little bit dry, and I find that's the case with some of my Tarte products, especially like my Tarte blushes. They do dry out a little bit, so eventually they do expire, but those lasted a long time. Exposed is still one of my favorites. I love that color. I also bought the Makeup Forever 5 Camouflage Cream Palette. This is a random purchase. I don't think I bought this based on anybody's recommendation on YouTube. I just remember that I needed a concealer, and I thought this would be a great option because there were shades that would work for under my eyes and then shades that would work to kind of cover up any acne or acne scarring. My skin used to break out like crazy and then scar, so I always needed like a heavy duty concealer to really conceal any breakouts or redness under my foundation. I used that thing so much. The only color in the whole palette that didn't work for me was like the orange one. It was a little bit too dark, but I used all of the colors. I used the green one. I definitely got my money's worth with that product, but it's kind of random that I decided to grab that one. Now, I don't think I would ever grab like a concealer palette. I would just choose one shade that works for me. but I remember loving that so much. So in July of 2012, I did purchase the Urban Decay Naked 2 palette, and I remember being so excited about this because one of my very first high-end eyeshadow palette purchases was the original Naked palette. I think I actually still have my original Urban Decay Naked palette, which I don't use as much anymore. I think it's more of like a nostalgia thing for me, and I'm not ever emotionally attached to makeup, but there's something about the Naked palettes that I can't seem to get rid of them. Like I still have my original Naked palettes and I still love them even though I don't use them. So maybe I'll have to break this one back out. 2012 is a long time ago, but I think the formula is still good. Again, it's been a long time since I've used it, but I do remember buying that. I don't remember buying this product, but in September of 2012, I purchased the Benefit Sugarlicious Lip and Cheek Kit. I just remember everybody was obsessed with Benefit, and I think people still are Benefit fans. I purchase cruelty-free products now, so I haven't purchased from Benefit in a long time, but I can't say it was ever one of my absolute favorite brands. I really loved their boxed powder blushes, but that was pretty much it. But this kit was $28 and it came with two of like their cream cheek products, one powder blush, and then a lip gloss. And I remember wearing that lip gloss all the time. It was one of my favorites. And then I did love their powder or their boxed powder blushes as well. So in September, I actually ended up purchasing the Urban Decay Smoked Eyeshadow Palette. I remember loving that palette. It was so beautiful. I think I decluttered it a few years ago because I wasn't getting a ton of use out of it. I wasn't really into like cool toned, colorful shades, and I had those neutrals in other palettes, but now I love greens and blues, so I think if I had that in my collection now, I would get a ton of use out of it. But I wasn't really into like super smoky eyes for a long time, so I personally didn't end up using it a whole lot at the time, but again, I feel like if I had it now, I would get a lot more use out of it. So in 2013, I placed a few orders. I got my first beauty blender. I've never been a diehard beauty blender fan. I've gone through phases where I've used beauty blender and then phases where I haven't. And right now I'm using a Real Technique sponge and it does a great job. It's kind of like if I have a beauty blender in my collection, I will use it. But if I don't, I won't go out and spend the money on it. So if I get it in like a subscription box, which I just got one in my FabFitFun, or if I got it for like a discount or it came as part of a set, I would definitely use it. It's just not a necessity for me. So at the end of the year, I remember buying the Hourglass liquid lipstick in the shade Icon because a ton of people were raving about that on YouTube. And it's crazy because I remember wearing it a lot, but at the time, I don't think liquid lipsticks were really a super popular product. So there weren't a ton of brands that had really popular liquid lipsticks. And I don't remember, or no, I do remember that that product was very drying, a little bit uncomfortable. It looked so beautiful on the lips, but I never fell in love with the formula, but it was $28. So I made it work for me. I wore it all the time. I just clicked on it and they do still have those. That is so crazy to me. There are so many other affordable, high quality liquid lipsticks at this point that I don't think, or I know that I would never spend $28 on that again. So in 2014, I did purchase the Urban Decay Naked Basics palette, and I loved that palette so much. That was like one of my staple neutral eyeshadow palettes. At that point, I really only had like a couple of palettes in my collection, so I remember getting a ton of use out of it. Again, I think that I've decluttered mine at this point because I have other palettes that have shades very similar to those, but I did really enjoy that and I got a lot of use out of that. And I remember my sisters had it too, and they like hit pan on all of their shadows and loved it. So in 2014, I did get the Too Faced Chocolate Bar Eyeshadow Palette, which is still one of my favorites. Again, I feel like I don't use that as much as I should. It's just, I love eyeshadow palettes, so honestly, I always have new ones coming in, and some of my old ones get neglected, and I know that's not ideal, but when you film YouTube videos, you do have to always be trying out new products, unless you're a different type of channel that like focuses on using up products, but I do film a lot of reviews, a lot of comparisons, so it kind of sucks that some of my old products get lost in the shuffle, but I do still love the chocolate bar palettes. I would love to pull that one back out again and really focus on using it because for a long time, it was like my number one palette. So at the end of 2014, I placed an order and I got a NARS Audacious lipstick in the shade Anna. That was my favorite lipstick for the longest time. I remember wearing it in so many different videos and just like loving it so much. I loved the formula, I loved the color, but I could never bring myself to buy another one because it was $34, which is so expensive for a lipstick. But I never did end up buying another one because they were just way too much money for me. I can't justify spending $34 on one lipstick. I guess if you wear wear it a lot, it's totally worth the money, but I switch mine up so often, and at this point I have so many affordable options that I have a hard time with high-end lipsticks, especially $34 lipsticks. That day I also got the Becca Mineral Blush in the shade Flower Child, and I love Becca blushes. They're so beautiful. I need to break mine back out again. I've been really focused on my Hourglass blushes for a long time because that's just my favorite blush formula. I've kind of neglected a lot of my other blushes, but the Becca blushes are really beautiful. I still have that color. I do love it. And then I also got the Urban Decay Naked 2 Basics eyeshadow palette. I do like the Urban Decay Naked Basics palettes. Again, I've passed them along to friends and family at this point because I do have other palettes in my collection that I love just as much, if not more, but for a long time, I really enjoyed those. I think I reviewed them on my channel back in the day. I used them all the time. The last product that I'll talk about is the Tarte Tartelette Amazonian Clay Matte Eyeshadow Palette. That was $39. I remember buying it because everybody raved about that palette and everybody said it was the best, and I was really late to the game even getting that when I did because by that point it had been out for a while and I just didn't like it. I don't know if I returned that, but I ended up decluttering it very soon after I tried it because I just couldn't fall in love with it. The formula was not my favorite. It's an all matte palette, and a lot of people really love it and really love that formula, but it doesn't work that well for me. I've tried the Tartelette in Bloom palette. I never tried the Tartelette Toasted palette, even though it was on my list because I didn't like the original too. So that one didn't work for me. I either decluttered it or returned it. I usually return very few products, but I might have returned that one just because I didn't like it. Okay, so I think I'll actually end there. There are quite a few products after that, but then we're heading into like 2015, 2016, which is a little bit more recent, but this was a fun video to film. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, or like let me know your very first high-end purchase. Mine was the Too Faced, I think it was their Natural Eyes palette. They've redone it so many times since then, but I remember loving the shade. Like there was a beautiful gold shade, there were pretty brown shades, and I remember using it like crazy. And then my second one was the Urban Decay Naked palette, but I would love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for watching. And again, I'll link Taylor's video as well as a few of my other favorites in the description box below, but I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.